yeah, looking at the inner workings, you could say, of the U.S. government.
The president also saying that he had great discussions about Gaza. That we took earlier. We took some of those comments earlier and played some of those comments for you. He was sitting there along with King Abdullah II of Jordan, making comments there as well earlier. When we do get the tape playback of these comments from President Trump, we will bring them to you as soon as they play.
Yeah, here's another one. Did we say these ones? All of our actions are fully public. This, again, is coming from Elon, and again, the conflict thing, so forgive me. Just kind of repeating them as we see them.
We're kind of getting them from a few different places.
Yeah, there's a lot coming at us.
This is a little, nice little, you know, the idea that you get the recording of it after the event is over, but there are reporters in there sending out headlines, so that kind of explains the discrepancy between when you hear from the president over the air versus when we get the headlines.
Well said, well said. And what we like to do is, as soon as we see them, kind of bring them out to you, because sometimes
I have to say that, or else my mind gets blown, because I'm like, wait, didn't we just hear that? You know? But
because sometimes things are said that certainly impact the markets. Yeah, here we go. I'm taking a look at some of the most read stories on the Bloomberg. One coming from Ken Griffin, who he, of course, is the Citadel founder. He said he's grateful that Elon Musk is taking time away from his companies to slash government spending, but offered blunt criticisms of President Trump's rhetoric on tariffs. He will do what it takes to win. This is coming from Griffin. He said this at the UBS Financial Services Conference underway in Miami. That was referring to Elon Musk, who, as we know, is CEO of Tesla and SpaceX.
Hey, we also heard a little earlier from Secretary of the Energy, Chris Wright, who said that coal will be essential in the U.S. for decades to come. He says that oil output, fully, the U.S. is seeking to stop closure of coal-fired power plants, and the U.S. needs the ability to produce nuclear materials here. That's certainly top of mind for you, Carol Massar. You've been spending a lot of your time talking about nuclear lately.
Yeah, I mean, you know, just doing a panel this morning that talked specifically about the growth that we're seeing in power demand, and it is all of a sudden, after not doing much for a few years, that we are seeing an increase, an uptick in energy demand, and it is because of data centers, AI, the electrification of our world, industrialization of our world. All of that matters. If you bring more factories, manufacturing back to the United States, that requires more energy. And so how do we provide the power that's necessary? And most say it's going to be hybrid. You're going to include fossil fuels, carbon-based fuels. You are going to include renewables, and then nuclear is definitely a component. It's something you and I all of a sudden in the last year and a half, 2 years, go back to that event we did at NJIT when all of a sudden they were talking a lot about nuclear power.
Did you ask about waste?
We did talk about waste, and that is the one thing that is still a problem.
And what did you say? You said, "Oh, just throw it in the ocean." Is that what Carol Massar said?
We did not. I did not say that. They conceded that that is still an issue that has to be dealt with.
We still don't know what to do with it.
And I think
nobody wants it.
Right. Nobody wants it. You know, the other thing is if you go from fission to fusion, you know, that can certainly change the dynamics. Am I saying it right? Fission to fusion, fission.
I have no idea.
But that's also a long ways off. But that's something to think about. And in a world where climate change and we have extreme volatility in weather, you want to make sure that plants, facilities, nuclear or other, are in safe places. But when it's nuclear, that is certainly a bigger consideration. So anyway, we're going to continue to track what's coming out of the White House. We're going to track those earnings when they cross the Bloomberg terminal. Do not go anywhere. We're heading over to our TV colleagues. That's because the closing bell, it starts right now.
Yep, exactly. And of course, valuation. Looking at NASDAQ here off by 0.4%, the underperformer. Here is the closing bell. Full coverage for you.
The closing bell. Bloomberg's comprehensive cross-platform coverage of the U.S. market close starts right now.
We're about 2 minutes away from the end of the trading day. I'm Alex Steele alongside Scarlett Fu. We're going to take you through the closing bell with a global simulcast. We're joined now by Carol Massar and Tim Stenovic in the radio studio. We got TV, radio, and YouTube audiences worldwide. We're going to parse through these moments. Headline level, guys, nada.
Yeah, nada. So you know what I'm going to talk about? I'm going to talk about Meta because it's up 17 in a row. So we're talking about a gain of 18%. We talked about it yesterday. A stock that has had the most consecutive gains. What a run. Just up about 0.3%, but nonetheless 17 in a row, up 18% in that time. So
It could have been one of your gainers, Carol.
I know.
It could have been.
I was going to, but it was down.
It was
earlier.
teetering, yeah.
It was teetering.
Yeah,
well
you don't want to.
said.
You don't want to risk it.
No.
Finley doesn't like that. Hey, equity indices aren't doing much. Bitcoin down 2.2%, just trading around $95,000 per Bitcoin.
You know, I wonder if the CPI report is going to be more of a catalyst for something tomorrow. Volatility around the CPI report, according to some analysts, might be kind of limited because the Fed's not going to count on this one CPI report to make its next decision, right? I mean, it's going to be a couple of data points, a couple of CPI reports, a couple of jobs reports. So, you know, the stakes are not as high for this CPI report, but it'll be super interesting given that it might color Jay Powell's Day 2 testimony.
Or at least they'll definitely get questions. He'll definitely get questions on that for sure. But I guess it's a direction of travel, right? We were talking earlier about inflation break-evens, particularly for 2-year, continue to rise. And we talked about Jay Powell not having entrenched inflation expectations, not seeing that in the market, but those expectations continue to move higher. All right, there's the closing bell, guys. Headline level, real uneventful. The S&P ending pretty much flat. The NASDAQ is the biggest loser of the day, but still just off by about 0.4%. And the Dow Jones Industrial Average off by about 0.3%. And just trying to take into account here what's happening with small and mid caps, also like a little bit softer, but guys, nothing to write home about.
Yeah, it's like ho-hum, right? S&P 500, kind of an even split. 261 names to the upside, Scarlet 241 to the downside.
All right, let's take a look at the IMAP, which splits the S&P 500 into its 11 main sectors. And there is more green than there is red, and it's led by consumer staples, up about 0.9%. Energy stocks and material stocks also gaining at least 0.5%. The laggards of the day include consumer discretionary, which really is, we're talking about auto companies, automakers, which as a group are down about 5%. Healthcare stocks also marginally lower, and communication services just barely in the red.
All right, guys, 2 individual gainers. Intel, it's a top gainer in both the NASDAQ 100 and the S&P 500 on this Tuesday. This is coming after Vice President J.D. Vance over at the AI Summit in France said that the Trump administration will make sure that the most sophisticated artificial intelligence hardware is made right here in the United States. The two, you might remember, I'm talking also about global foundries, because if we bring that one up as well, Intel's up about 6% here at the close. Same, global foundries up about 6% as well. Those two companies are the largest U.S.-based operators of semi-foundries that make chips for outside customers. So, yeah, no surprise to see them gaining. And then Coca-Cola, it's up about 4.7% here at the close. The company coming out, fourth quarter organic sales growth and profit topping Wall Street expectations, and analysts calling the company's annual outlook pretty solid. So again, some outperformance by those names.
Okay, Scarlett mentioned that automakers were lower. Tesla helping to pull them down. 6.3% to the downside for Tesla. Down for a 5th day in a row, all because of BYD. Over in China, the company added advanced driver assistance features across most of its lineup for no extra cost. Its shares hit a record and Tesla moved lower. It's called the God's Eye Driver Assistance Program. Standard in vehicles priced from about $13,700. Can you believe that price point? It's also included in several low-cost models, such as that Seagull hatchback. Tesla down about 32% from those December highs.
Let me just jump in because Gilead Sciences, or Gilead as it's now known, just reported results. Let's give you what happened in the fourth quarter. EPS of $1.90, beating the average analyst estimate of $1.71. Revenue of $7.57 billion, also higher than what was anticipated. In addition, Gilead raises its quarterly dividend to 79 cents a share. The profit forecast as well, topping analyst estimates. 2025 adjusted EPS anywhere from $7.70 to $8.10. Analysts were looking for $7.54. That stock higher by almost 3%.
All right, let's get to Avis. It's down about 5% here in the aftermarket. Fourth quarter results, America's revenue, we're looking at $2.12 billion. That's pretty much what the estimate was, $2.11 billion. International revenue, we're talking about $593 million. That's a little bit light. The estimate was for $602.4. We're looking also at overall revenue, $2.71 billion, smack on what the street was expecting. But we are again seeing this stock down in the aftermarket. You know, it's kind of interesting. It's been up about 11% year to date, but we are seeing some disappointment here in the trade.
Yeah.
Yeah, also one headline, Avis Budget has named Brian Choi to succeed Joe Ferraro as its CEO. Shares right now down about 5.2%. Well, speaking of shares that are lower, Coty shares finished the day down by more than 9% today, hitting their lowest level going back to 2022. The company did lower its full-year profit projections and reported fiscal second quarter revenue that missed Wall Street expectations. And then check this one out. Fluence Energy shares really taking a dive today. The company reported that it slashed sales guidance and cited contract delays in Australia. Shout out to Carol Master for directing me to this one. Shares falling today by more than 46%.
What an ugly chart.
Yeah,
that's
that's you need a
Can't even
2-day
see
chart
it,
for that
right?
puppy. That's rough. Okay, taking a look at the bond market for a bit here, guys. The back end selling up just a touch. Yields up by about 3 to 4 basis points. We had that 3-year auction though, $58 billion. That came in pretty strong. Demand was really there. Then we get the 10-year and the 30-year later on in this week too. So again, looking for that supply digestion. But many tend to look at 4.5% on the 10-year as like that level. That then do we sort of propel higher and get to 5%? That's sort of the line in the sand a little bit. So interesting to see how we trade tomorrow.
You know, it's interesting. I want to go back to the trade. And, you know, we were talking about the CPI report tomorrow, followed by then the following day, PPI. But we were talking with Mike McKee earlier out of Washington, who broke down the Jay Powell talking, also Gina Martin Adams watching the markets. And they said, we are kind of watching this. There's so much coming out, investors that, you know, little clues that we can get even from economic data points, certainly something like inflation, it's important.
Yeah, although John Authors has pointed this out. If you listen to companies' earnings calls, they aren't talking as much about inflation anymore. I mean, tariffs has kind of taken the place because that is a big question mark, and the impact on what it means for inflation is still very uncertain.
All right, we're getting some more earnings crossed right now. DoorDash crossing as well as Lyft. Lyft sees first quarter adjusted EBITDA about $90 to $95 million. Estimates were for $93.7 million. Fourth quarter gross bookings came in just shy of estimates at $4.28 billion. Lyft, though, buying back up to $500 million of shares. Shares of Lyft right now in the after hours higher by about 6.7%. Fourth quarter rides coming in just in line with estimates at 218.5 million, and fourth quarter adjusted net coming in above estimates at $114.5 million.
All right, going to DoorDash here, guys. For the fourth quarter, it looks to be a beat on revenue, a beat on orders. In terms of earnings, it might have come in a little bit light. Now, taking a look at their first quarter, the big headline is that gross order value. They now see at the high end of that $23 billion. The estimate was for under 23, so that also is a beat. Their adjusted EBITDA on the high end also beating. So pretty strong results from DoorDash, even though that stock is down 2%.
Yeah, you know, I'm just watching Lyft, though, here in the aftermarket. It's bouncing around a lot. It's up 2.5%, then it's up just about 0.75%. But keep in mind that buyback, definitely a bit of an eye-popping number. But it is interesting that it's its first buyback program, buying up to $500 million worth of shares. So investors, though, you know, bouncing around in terms of these results here.
I noticed that as well, and it suggests this consistent return of capital to shareholders that we're going to wait to hear in the conference call how they address that and to what extent that means that business is going well, that they feel confident enough to go buy back their own shares. You know, I look at the DoorDash results, and I'm sorry, I can't help but be colored by emotion.
I knew you were going to do this.
Yeah, well,
she doesn't like DoorDash.
I was talking about this at the meeting because my son orders way too much of it. And, you know, as a Gen Xer, this idea that you're going to pay X percent of the final bill on service costs and delivery fees, it's bananas.
I've talked to these young people, Scarlett, before, and they have to, like, delete the app from their phone because they're spending too much money.
Because they're so used to it. Well, they don't have any basis of comparison. The fact that you, like, a big chunk of your final bill is on delivery, just, oh.
It just, yeah. Well, I mean, you have to pay for it. They're talking, though, in their earnings release about some new initiatives that they're hoping to introduce to give valuable services for customers, merchants, as well as dashers, as they call it. And they said that they exited 2024 with some good momentum. So still trying to find out, you know, the reason why that stock is still getting hit. But nonetheless, interesting when it talks about its really strong order demand.
Yeah, interesting to see. And we are seeing some movement here, so we'll see how they kind of settle in the aftermarket and on those analyst calls. All right, guys, that's a wrap. Our cross-platform radio, TV, YouTube, Bloomberg Originals. We call it the closing bell. We'll see you again, same time, same place tomorrow.
This is Bloomberg Business Week. Insight from the reporters and editors that bring you America's most trusted business magazine. Plus, global business, finance, and tech news as it happens. Bloomberg Business Week with Carol Massar and Tim Stenivek on Bloomberg Radio.
It is Bloomberg Business Week. That's Carol Master. I'm Tim Stenovic. We mentioned that the president has been signing executive orders. He is speaking to press right now. We're going to bring you those comments when they do start to play. We are getting some headlines. He says that we will seek congressional vote on Doge's cuts if needed. Remember, as Carol mentioned, Elon Musk is in that press, not a press briefing, but he's in the room as well.
Yeah, I mean, listen, that seems to be pretty significant. We'll also, the president's saying we'll look at spending related to military and education. The president's saying federal workers taking buyouts will get their money. He also mentioned that Mark Fogel, the American detained in Russia that was freed, he will be at the White House tonight. So again, tracking these headlines that are coming out of the White House. As soon as we have that playback, we will play it for you in its entirety.
In the meantime, we got from Jay Powell in his testimony to the Senate Banking Committee today quite a bit. He said the Fed doesn't need to rush to adjust interest rates, again signaling that officials will be patient before lowering borrowing costs further. I'm wondering if it changes Joyce Wong's view at all. She's Vice President and Senior Client Portfolio Manager at American Century Investments. She joins us here in the Bloomberg Interactive Brokers studio. Before Powell spoke, you sent some notes over to our team. You said, we expect 2 to 3 rate cuts this year. Did Powell change your mind?
No, we were always pricing in the rate cuts towards the back end of the year. And because we know that there's a lot of uncertainty around what Trump's policies are going to be, how the market's going to react to them, what sort of counter tariffs we might incur. So we've always thought that the Fed has the ability to be patient. Jay Powell re-emphasized that today, highlighting the strength of the U.S. economy. So no.
So what happens between now and those rate cuts? Does inflation rear its ugly head again?
So this is something that I've actually spent a long time talking about last year, and a lot of people were thinking, it's kind of like Chicken Little, but I think actually inflation is one of the bigger risks to the market because people dismissed it all last year. And I was always thinking, if I go to the store, prices are the same or higher. And the way consumers are affected by inflation, that's going to affect their buying power and their confidence. And that, we know, drove most of U.S. GDP growth last year. And so if the consumer starts to slow and weaken, there goes the U.S. economy.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting, although the consumer continues to kind of surprise us by holding up here. Well, is it a case, Joyce, that you think that inflation, or I think about the Fed's target rate, that we just need to settle above, that there's just stuff going on in the economy, that 2% target I think about that the Fed has to get to, it's just not realistic anymore?
Yeah, that's going to be interesting how they kind of maintain that 2%, or is it higher, is it 2.5%? I think Jay Powell did buy himself some time by talking about an average 2% inflation target, rather than sort of that hard ceiling or floor that they were targeting. So I do think he has a little bit of time, but if you think about how hot inflation has been running the last few years, to get back to 2%, we'd actually have to see inflation lower than 2%, which we haven't seen since prior to the coronavirus pandemic.
As I mentioned, we're awaiting comments from President Trump. I wonder, Joyce, how you look at the comments from the president that we get each and every day in terms of thinking about your approach to investing, separating the signal from the noise, and what actually he is going to act on versus talking about, because there is a delta there, and a lot of people have pointed to that.
Yes, absolutely. And, going into this year, honestly, we thought that the tariffs would have been either done on day one, as he mentioned earlier, or kind of pushed out. And he sort of did an in-between, where he did come out with the tariffs, but then delayed them kind of on the same day on Canada and Mexico. And so it'll be determined to see, once we get to the end of that probationary period, how he ends up following up on those tariffs. But I do think as longer-term investors, what we're focusing on is more of our strategic position. One thing that at American Century we've been talking more about within our investment committee this year, though, is taking advantage of some of those tactical signals. So being a little more active on things like increasing credit risk when spreads widen, being a little more active on duration. And at our size, we're able to be very nimble in the market.
Well, that's what I was going to say. You guys have a lot of money under management, and I am curious. I just want to go there. What are you seeing in terms of flows coming in? Investors feeling confident about putting new money to work, and if so, how do they want it played? I'm just curious, the guide that you get from them, are they willing to take on more risk? Do they want to be more cautionary? What are you seeing?
Yeah, it's been interesting with fixed income because if you think back to 2022, I mean, I've spent almost 20 years in fixed income. I never thought I'd see a year where core bonds were down double digits, right? And so a lot of investors have really been scared off of being back in fixed income after 22, and cash is still paying 4.25. So a lot of people are kind of sitting in money markets, CDs, T-bills, and just rolling their cash, waiting. I think if the Fed does get to the back half of this year and enacts those 2 or 3 rate cuts, depending on the strength of the economy, we could start to see a lot more demand flow back into fixed income as that free money yield is gone on cash.
But if rates go down, forgive me, I've got it. But if rates come down, don't you think that investors are more inclined to say, this is going to be good for the equity market? Certainly, those higher valuations. That's as long as the economy doesn't fall apart and the growth demand, metrics stay. Wouldn't they rather kind of take that bet?
I think so, and that's why we actually favor investment grade fixed income. So kind of that barbell. It's like, I agree. Given how tight spreads are in high yield and distressed, it doesn't make sense to try to put money to work there. Take more risk on the equity side. Be more conservative in your fixed income allocation and stay with investment grade.
Okay, Carol knows I've just been obsessed. Thanks to Carol and also to our colleague Mandeep.
Are you talking Waymo again?
No, well, kind of. I'm talking AI. Kind of obsessed with bringing it into our own workflow. Are you using it at all in your day-to-day?
We use it a little bit right now. I think a lot of asset management companies are trying to figure out the best way to start using AI without giving away proprietary holdings or processes or things like that. So we have to be a little bit careful. I know we've been doing a lot of internal, more insular developments of AI. One thing we have done is sort of in response to the technology and AI is get higher frequency signals. So we've been building more proprietary tools in-house to help us analyze data, news flow, things like that, and AI is a part of that process.
We are awaiting a playback from President Trump. Joyce, I'm just curious, what do you watch out of the news, out of the administration in D.C., and just kind of quickly?
For us as fixed income investors, obviously interest rates are going to be the key driver of fixed income returns this year. So what we're watching are those tariffs and the inflation story. So anything related to that is going to be top of mind for me.
Taxes?
We assume that the individual taxes will be continued and they will reach some sort of deal on the corporate tax side. So that's kind of a positive on risk.
What is the percentage rate that you see for corporate taxes?
So I think that he has mentioned trying to cut back down to 15%. I don't know if they're going to be able to get there, just given the deficit concerns. You might actually see the bear steepening of the yield curve if that happens, right? Because then you have the deficit concerns coming to play.
The 10-year is kind of making a nice little appearance when it comes to what Scott Bessent has been talking about with regard to what the administration is paying attention to. What do you see as the direction of the 10-year? I'm surprised it hasn't moved more.
Exactly, and that's actually why we've been recommending investors stay shorter duration, because the yield curve has uninverted from the 210s, but it's only by about 25 basis points as of today. So in our minds, there's a lot of volatility in the 10-year. Like you were saying, it could go down to 4, it could go up to 5. The 2-year point is really anchored to the Fed, and that's what Jerome Powell has control over. And so that's why we see less volatility in the 2-year. Capture your yield, stay short duration. Don't necessarily position yourself out on the 10.
All right, we're going to leave it on that note. Joyce, thank you so much. Really appreciate it. Joyce Wong, she's Vice President and Senior Client Portfolio Manager at American Century Investments, joining us here in our Bloomberg Interactive Brokers studio. Her focus, as you can tell, on fixed income. So great chat. At this point, we do want to head to the White House.
Yeah, to the Oval Office, too, where President Trump is making comments recorded just moments ago. He's joined with Elon Musk and Elon Musk's son, X, there as well.
Discussion concerning Gaza and everything else. We had discussions also about Saturday at 12 o'clock. It's going to be a big moment. We'll see what happens. I don't expect much happening with these people, but we'll see what happens. And we're going to be signing a very important deal today. It's Doge, and I'm going to ask Elon to tell you a little bit about it and some of the things that we found, which are shocking. Billions and billions of dollars in waste, fraud, and abuse, and I think it's very important, and that's one of the reasons I got elected. I said we're going to do that. Nobody had any idea it was that bad, that sick, and that corrupt. And it seems hard to believe that judges want to try and stop us from looking for corruption, especially when we found hundreds of millions of dollars worth, much more than that, in just a short period of time. And we want to weed out the corruption. And it seems hard to believe that a judge could say, we don't want you to do that. Well, so maybe we have to look at the judges, because that's a very serious, I think it's a very serious violation. I'll ask Elon Musk to say a few words, and we'll take some questions. Elon, go ahead.
Sure. So at a high level, if you say what is the goal of Doge, and I think a significant part of the presidency is to restore democracy. This may seem like, well, are we in a democracy? Well, if you don't have a feedback loop, okay, we would have to, if you sorry. So, I tell you, gravitas can be difficult sometimes. If there's not a good feedback loop from the people to the government, and if you have rule of the bureaucrat, if the bureaucracy is in charge, and then what meaning does democracy actually have? If the people cannot vote and have their will be decided by their elected representatives in the form of the president and the Senate and the House, then we don't live in a democracy, we live in a bureaucracy. So it's incredibly important that we close that feedback loop, we fix that feedback loop, and that the public's elected representatives, the president, the House, and the Senate, decide what happens, as opposed to a large, unelected bureaucracy. This is not to say that there are good people who are in the federal bureaucracy, but you can't have an autonomous federal bureaucracy. You have to have one that is responsive to the people. That's the whole point of a democracy. And if you looked at this, if you looked at the founders today and said, what do you think of the way things have turned out? Well, we have this unelected, fourth unconstitutional branch of government, which is the bureaucracy, which has, in a lot of ways, currently more power than any elected representative. And this is not something that people want, and it does not match the will of the people. So it's just something we've got to fix. And then we've also got to address the deficit. So we've got a $2 trillion deficit, and if we don't do something about this deficit, the country's going bankrupt. I mean, it's really astounding that the interest payments alone on the national debt exceed the Defense Department budget, which is shocking, because we spend a lot of money on defense, and if that just keeps going, we're essentially going to bankrupt the country. So what I really want to say is, like, it's not optional for us to reduce the federal expenses. It's essential. It's essential for America to remain solvent as a country, and it's essential for America to have the resources necessary to provide things to its citizens and not simply be servicing vast amounts of debt.
And also, could you mention some of the things that your team has found, some of the crazy numbers, including the woman that walked away with about $30 million,
right,
et cetera?
Well, we do find it sort of rather odd that there are quite a few people in the bureaucracy who have ostensibly a salary of a few $100,000, but somehow manage to accrue tens of millions of dollars in net worth while they are in that position, which is, what happened at USAID. We're just curious as to where it came from. Maybe they're very good at investing, in which case we should take their investment advice, perhaps. But there seems to be mysteriously they get wealthy. We don't know why. Where does it come from? And I think the reality is that they're getting wealthy at the taxpayer expense. That's the honest truth of it. So, we're looking at, if you look at, say, Treasury, for example, basic controls that should be in place, that are in place in any company, such as making sure that any given payment has a payment categorization code, that there is a comment field that describes the payment, and that if a payment is on the do not pay list, that you don't actually pay it. None of those things are true currently. So the reason that departments can't pass audits is because the payments don't have a categorization code. It's like just massive number of blank checks just flying out the building. So you can't reconcile blank checks. You've got comment fields that are also blank, so you don't know why the payment was made. And then we've got this truly absurd, a do not pay list, which can take up to a year for an organization to get on a do not pay list. And this, we're talking about terrorist organizations, we're talking about known fraudsters, known aspects of waste, known things that do not match any congressional appropriation. It can take up to a year to get on the list, and even once on the list is not used. It's mind-blowing. So what we're talking about here, we're really just talking about adding common sense controls that should be present, that haven't been present. So you say, like, well, how could such a thing arise? That seems crazy. When you understand that really everything is geared towards complaint minimization, so then you understand the motivations. So if people receive money, they don't complain, obviously. But if people don't receive money, they do complain. And the fraudsters complain the loudest and the fastest. So then when you understand that, then it makes sense. Oh, that's why everything they approve all the payments at Treasury. Because if you approve all the payments, you don't get complaints. But now we're saying that, no, actually, we are going to complain. If money is spent badly, if your taxpayer dollars are not spent in a sensible and frugal manner, then that's not okay. Your tax dollars need to be spent wisely on things that matter to the people. I mean, these things, like, it's just common sense. It's not draconian or radical, I think. It's really just saying, let's look at each of these expenditures and say, is this actually in the best interest of the people? And if it is, it's approved. If it's not, we should think about it. So, there's crazy things like just cursory examination of Social Security, and we've got people in there that are 150 years old. Now, do you know anyone who's 150? I don't. Okay. They should be on the Guinness Book of World Records. They're missing out. So, that's a case where, like, I think they're probably dead. It's my guess. Or they should be very famous, one of the two. And then there's a whole bunch of Social Security payments where there's no identifying information. Well, like, why is there no identifying information? Obviously, we want to make sure that people who deserve to receive Social Security do receive it, and that they receive it quickly and accurately. I'll tell you another crazy thing. So, one of the things is, like, we are trying to sort of right-size the federal bureaucracy, just make sure that this. Obviously, there need to be a lot of people working for the federal government, but not as many as currently. So we're saying, well, okay, let's, if people can retire, with full benefits and everything, that would be good. They can retire, get their retirement payments, everything. And then we were told, this is actually, I think, a great anecdote, because we were told, no, the most number of people that could retire possibly in a month is 10,000. We're like, well, why is that? Well, because all the retirement paperwork is manual on paper. It's manually calculated, then written down on a piece of paper. Then it goes down a mine. And like, what do you mean a mine? Like, yeah, there's a limestone mine where we store all the retirement paperwork. And you look at a picture of this mine. We'll post some pictures afterwards. And this mine looks like something out of the 50s because it was started in 1955. So it looks like it's like a time warp. And then the speed, the limiting factor is the speed at which the mine shaft elevator can move determines how many people can retire from the federal government. And the elevator breaks down sometimes, and then nobody can retire. Doesn't that sound crazy? There's like 1,000 people that work on this. So I think if we take those people and say, like, you know what, instead of working in a mine shaft and carrying manila envelopes to boxes in a mine shaft, you could do practically anything else, and you would add to the goods and services of the United States in a more useful way. So anyway, so I think that's an example. Like at a high level, if you say, like, how do we increase prosperity? Is we get people to shift from roles that are low to negative productivity to high productivity roles. And so you increase the total output of goods and services, which means that there's a higher standard of living available for everyone. That's the actual goal. Everyone's very quiet. Well, So, if people normally is quiet?
Your detractors, Mr. Musk.
I have to what?
Including a lot of Democrats.
I have detractors?
You do, sir.
I don't believe it.
Say that you're orchestrating a hostile takeover of government and doing it in a non-transparent way. What's your response to that criticism?
Well, first of all, you couldn't ask for a stronger mandate from the public. The public voted. We have a majority of the public voting for President Trump. We won the House. We won the Senate. The people voted for major government reform. There should be no doubt about that. That was on the campaign. The president spoke about that at every rally. The people voted for major government reform, and that's what the people are going to get. They're going to get what they voted for. And a lot of times, people that don't get what they voted for, but in this presidency, they are going to get what they voted for. And that's what democracy is all about.
Mr. Musk, the White House says that you will identify and excuse yourself from any conflicts of interest that you may have. Does that mean that you are, in effect, policing yourself? What are the checks and balances that are in place to ensure that there is accountability and transparency?
Well, we actually are trying to be as transparent as possible. In fact, we post our actions to the Doge handle on X and to the Doge website. So all of our actions are maximally transparent. In fact, I don't think there's been, I don't know of a case where an organization has been more transparent than the Doge organization. So, and the kind of things we're doing are, I think, very, very simple and basic. They're not, what I mentioned, for example, about Treasury, just making sure that payments that go out, taxpayer money that goes out, is categorized correctly, that the payment is explained, that organizations on the do not pay list, which takes a lot to get there, that actually are not paid, which currently they are paid. These are not individual judgment decisions. These are about simply having sensible checks and balances in the system itself to ensure that taxpayer money is spent well. So it's got nothing to do with, like, say, a contract for some company of mine at all.
But if there is a conflict of interest when it comes to you yourself, for instance, you've received billions of dollars in federal contracts when it comes to the Pentagon, for instance, which the president, I know, has directed you to look into.
Yeah.
Are you policing yourself in that? Is there any sort of accountability check and balance in place that would provide any transparency for the American people?
Well, all of our actions are fully public. So if you see anything, you say, like, wait a second, hey, Elon, that seems like maybe that's, there's a conflict there. It's not like people are going to be shy about saying that. They'll say it immediately,
Including you yourself.
Yes. But transparency is what builds trust, not simply somebody asserting trust. So not somebody saying they're trustworthy, but transparency, so you can see everything that's going on. And then you can see, am I doing something that benefits one of my companies or not? It's totally obvious.
3, 2, 1.
And we
On the
thought
latest
that we
edition
would
of the
not let
Bloomberg
him
Business
do
Week
that
podcast, a
segment
conversation
or
with Max
look in that
Chafkin
area
of
if
Business
we
Suite
thought there was
on
a,
Elon Musk's offer to buy
lack of
OpenAI and
transparency or a
CEO Sam
conflict of
Altman's
interest.
reaction
And,
to that bid.
we watched that also. He's a big businessman. He's a successful guy. That's why we want him doing this. We don't want an unsuccessful guy doing this. Now, one thing also that Elon hasn't really mentioned are the groups of people that are getting some of these payments. They're ridiculous. And we're talking about billions of dollars that we've already found. We found fraud and abuse. I would say those two words as opposed to the third word that I usually use, but in this case, fraud and abuse. It's abusive because most of these things are virtually made up, or certainly money shouldn't be sent to them. And you know what I'm talking about. It's crazy. So, but we're talking about tens of billions of dollars that we've already found. And now a judge who's an activist judge wants to try and stop us from doing this. Why? Why would they want to do that? I campaigned on this. I campaigned on the fact that I said government is corrupt. And it is very corrupt. It's very, very, it's also foolish. As an example, a man has a contract for 3 months and the contract ends, but they keep paying him for the next 20 years, because nobody ends a contract. You get a lot of that. You have a contract that's a 3-month contract. Now, normally, if you're in a small, in all fairness, it's the size of this thing is so big.
Yeah.
But if you have a contract and you're in a regular business, you end the contract in 3 months. It's a consultant. Here's a contract for 3 months, but it goes on for 20 years. And the guy doesn't say that he got money for 20 years, you know? They don't say it. They just keep getting checks month after month, and you have various things like that, and even much worse than that, actually, much worse. And I guess you call that incompetence, maybe.
Yeah.
It could be corruption. It could be a deals made on both sides, you know, where the guy gets the money, he kicks. I think there's a lot of kickback here. I see a lot of kickback here.
There's a lot of kickbacks.
Tremendous kickback, because nobody could be so stupid to give out some of these contracts, so he has to get a kickback. So that's what I got elected for, that and borders and military and a lot of things, but this is a big part of it. And I hope that the court system is going to allow us to do what we have to do. We got elected to among other things, find all of this fraud, abuse, all of this horrible stuff going on. And we've already found billions of dollars, not like a little bit, billions, many billions of dollars. And when you get down to it, it's going to be probably close to $1 trillion. It could be close to $1 trillion that we're going to find. That will have quite an impact on the budget. And you'll go to a judge where they handpick a judge, and he has certain leanings. I'm not knocking anybody for that, but he has certain leanings, and he wants us to stop looking. How do you stop looking? I mean, we've already found it. We have a case in New York where a hotel has paid $59 million, $59 million because it's housing migrants, illegal migrants. All illegal, I believe.
And they were being paid twice the normal room rate at 100% occupancy.
Unbelievable.
So it's a racket.
Mr. Musk, can I ask a question?
Well, if I may sort of just going for the president's comments, at a high level, you say, well, what are the two ingredients that are really necessary in order to cut the budget deficit in half from $2 trillion to $1 trillion? And it's really two things: competence and caring. And if you add competence and caring, you'll cut the budget deficit in half. And I fully expect to be scrutinized and get a daily proctology exam, basically. Might as well just camp out there. So it's not like I think I can get away with something. I'll be scrutinized nonstop. But with the support of the president, we can cut the budget deficit in half from $2 trillion to $1 trillion, and then with deregulation, because there's a lot of sort of regulations that don't ultimately serve the public good. We need to free the builders of America to build. And if we do that, that means I think we can get the economic growth to be maybe 3-4%, maybe 5%. And that means if you can get $1 trillion of economic growth and you can cut the budget deficit by $1 trillion, between now and next year, there is no inflation. There's no inflation in 26. And if the government is not borrowing as much, it means that interest costs decline. So everyone's, the mortgage, their car payment, their credit card bills, anything, their student debt, the monthly payments drop. That's a fantastic scenario for the average American. I mean, imagine they're going down the grocery aisle and the prices from one year to the next are the same, and their mortgage, all their debt payments dropped. How great is that for the average American?
We had no idea we were going to find this much, and it's open. It's not like complicated. It's not simple stuff. It's like
a lot of work. Yeah.
We can't believe it. A lot of work. A lot of smart people involved. Very, very smart people. But you're talking about anywhere maybe $500 billion. It's crazy the kind of numbers you're talking
really crazy.
about. You know, normally when you're looking at something, you'll find you're looking for 1 out of 100. Here, you're almost reversing it. You look for one that's good.
Yeah.
And you can look at the title and you say, why are we doing this? Why are we doing that? And the public gets it. You know, the public gets it. You've seen the polls. The public is saying, why are we paying all this money? This for years, this has gone on.
President Trump,
Yeah, go ahead. Wait, go ahead.
Senator Rand Paul today said that DOJ cuts will ultimately need a vote in Congress. Do you agree with that? Is that the plan?
I really don't know. I know this. We're finding tremendous fraud and tremendous abuse. If I need a vote of Congress to find fraud and abuse, it's fine with me. I think we'll get the vote, although there'll be some people that wouldn't vote. And how could a judge want to hold us back from finding all of this fraud and finding all of this incompetence? Why would that happen? Why would even Congress want to do that? Now, Congress, if we do need a vote, I think we'd get a very easy vote. because we have a track record now. We've already found billions of dollars of abuse, incompetence, and corruption. A lot of corruption.
If a judge does block one of your policies, part of your agenda, will you abide by that ruling? Will you comply?
Well, I
with that
always
order?
abide by the courts, and then I'll have to appeal it. But then what he's done is he slowed down the momentum, and it gives crooked people more time to cover up the books. You know, if a person's crooked and they get caught, other people see that, and all of a sudden it becomes harder later on. So, yeah, the answer is I always abide by the courts, always abide by them, and will appeal. But appeals take a long time, and I would hope that a judge, if you go into a judge and you show him, here's a corrupt situation, we have a check to be sent, but we found it to be corrupt. Do you want us to send this corrupt check to a person, or do you want us not to give it and give it back to the taxpayer? I would hope a judge would say, don't send it, give it back to the taxpayer.
Yeah, if I can add to that, what we're finding is that a bunch of the fraud is not even going to Americans. So I think we can all agree that if there's going to be fraud, it should at least go to Americans. But a bunch of the fraud rings that are operating in the United States and taking advantage of the federal government, especially in the entitlements programs, are actually foreign fraud rings. They're operating in other countries and actually exporting money to other countries. We should stop that. And this is big numbers. We're talking about $100 to $200 billion a year. Serious money.
Mr. Musk, you said on X that an example of the fraud that you have cited was $50 million of condoms was sent to Gaza. But after fact-check this, it apparently Gaza in Mozambique, and the program was to protect them against HIV. So can you correct the statements? It wasn't sent to Hamas, actually. It was sent to Mozambique, which makes sense why condoms was sent there.
Yeah.
And how can we make sure that all the statements that you said were correct, so we can trust what you say?
Well, first of all, some of the things that I say will be incorrect and should be corrected. So nobody's going to bat 1,000. I mean, we will make mistakes, but we'll act quickly to correct any mistakes. I'm not sure we should be sending $50 million worth of condoms to anywhere, frankly. I'm not sure that's something Americans would be really excited about. And that is really an enormous number of condoms, if you think about it. But if it went to Mozambique instead of Gaza, I'm like, okay, that's not as bad, but still, why are we doing that?
Mr. Musk, can you talk a little bit about how closely you're working with agency heads as you're directing these cuts? Do they have how much input do agency heads have when you're making these decisions?
Yeah, we work closely with the agency heads, there are sort of checks in place. So it's not just us just going in and doing things willy-nilly. It's in partnership with the agency heads, and I check frequently with the president to make sure that this is what the president wants to happen. So we talk almost every day, and I double check things to make sure, is this something, Mr. President, do you want us to do this? Then we'll do it.
USAID has been one of your main targets. Are you concerned at all that some of the cuts or that shutting that agency altogether may lead to diseases or other bigger problems starting in other countries that then come to the United States? Yeah, so that's an interesting example. So that's something where we work closely with the State Department and Secretary Rubio. And we have, for example, turned on funding for Ebola prevention and for HIV prevention. Left that, you said?
Yes, correct. And we are moving fast, so we will make mistakes, but we'll also fix the mistakes very quickly. So,
do you see it as a worthy cause, USAID?
I think that there's some worthy things, but overall, if you say what is the bang for the buck, I would say it was not very good. And there was far too much of what USAID was doing was influencing elections in ways that I think were dubious and do not stand the light of day.
I can just ask a follow-up to the Pentagon contracts. If you have received billions of dollars in contracts from the Pentagon, and the president's directing you to look into the Department of Defense, is that a conflict of interest?
And are going to do at the president's request.
Does that present a conflict of interest for you?
No, because you'd have to look at the individual contract and say, first of all, I'm not the one, filing the contract. It's people at SpaceX or someone who will be putting for the contract. And I'd like to say, if you see any contract where where it was awarded to SpaceX and it wasn't by far the best value for money for the taxpayer, let me know, because every one of them was.
The president said the other day that you might look at treasuries fees. Could you explain that a little bit? What kind of fraud, and that question goes to both of you, what kind of fraud are you expecting to see or do you see right now in U.S. Treasuries?
Yeah, I think you mean the Treasury Department as opposed to Treasury bills, or...
You also referenced Treasuries on Air Force One the other night.
Go ahead.
Well, as I mentioned earlier, really, the first order of business is to make sure we're actually collecting... Sorry for this. Although my son might enjoy this, but he's sticking his fingers in my ears and stuff. So it's been hard to hear sometimes. Hey, stop that. No, the stuff we're doing with the Treasury Department is so basic that you can't believe it doesn't exist already. So for example, like I mentioned, just making sure that when a payment goes out, it has to have a payment categorization code. It's like, what type of payment is this? You can't just leave the field blank. Currently, many payments, the field is left blank. And you have to describe what's the payment for, some basic rationalization. That also is left blank. So this is why, the Pentagon, when's the last time the Pentagon passed an audit? I mean, a decade ago, maybe? Ever? Really? And we want to, just in order to actually pass audits, you have to have financial information that allows you to trace the payments. And once in a while, the Treasury has to pause payments if it thinks the payment is going to a fraudulent organization. If a company or organization is on a do not pay list, we should not pay it. I'm sure you would agree. Like, if it's quite hard to get on that the do not pay list, it means that this is someone that is like dead people, terrorists, known fraudsters, that kind of thing. We should not pay them. But currently we do, which is crazy. We should stop that.
Many transactions. And by the way, hundreds, thousands of transactions like that. You know, we have a big team. And for the sake of the country, I hope that the person that's in charge and the other people that report to me that are in charge are allowed to do the right thing, namely make sure everything's honest, legitimate, and competent. But we're looking at just, when you look at USAID, that's one. We're going to look at the military. We're going to look at education. They're much bigger areas. But the USAID is really corrupt. I'll tell you, it's corrupt. It's incompetent, and it's really corrupt. And I can't imagine a judge saying, well, it may be corrupt, but you don't have the right. You got elected to look over the country and to, as we say, make America great again, but you don't have the right to go and look and see whether or not things are right that they're paying or that things are honest that they're paying. And nobody can even believe this. Other people, law professors, they've been saying, how can you take that person's right away? You're supposed to be running the country, but we're not allowed to look at who they're paying it to and what they're paying. We have massive amounts of fraud that we caught. I think we probably caught way over a lot of billions of dollars already in, 2 weeks?
Yes.
And it's going to go to numbers that you're not going to believe. And much, as I said, much is incompetence and much is dishonesty. We have to catch it. And the only way we're going to catch it is to look for it. And if a judge is going to say you're not allowed to look for it, that's pretty sad for our country. I don't understand how it could even work.
On the buyout program, can you personally guarantee that...
Which one?
The buyout program, the operative federal workers. Can you personally guarantee that the workers who opt in to resign now will be paid through September?
They'll get their money, but they're getting a good deal. They're getting a big buyout. And what we're trying to do is reduce government. We have too many people. We have office space. It's occupied by 4%. Nobody's showing up to work because they were told not to. And then Biden gave them a 5-year pass, some of them, 48,000 of them, gave them a 5-year pass, that for 5 years you don't have to show up to work. And let me tell you, this is largely, much of this stuff is because of Biden. It's his fault. He allowed this country, what he did on our border. What he did on our border is almost not as bad as what he did with all of these contracts that have come out. It's a very sad day when we look at it. I can't even believe it. But many contracts just extend, and they just keep extending, and there was nobody there to correct it. And that cannot be, I can't imagine that could be held up by the court. Any court that would say that the president or his representatives, like Secretary of the Treasury, Secretary of State, whatever, doesn't have the right to go over their books and make sure everything's honest. I mean, how can you have a country? You can't have anything that way. You can't have a business that way. You can't have a country that way. Hey, thank you very much, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you, press. Thank you, press. Head it out.
Coming back tonight. Mark Vogel will be at the White House tonight at about 10 o'clock. If you want to come over, you can say hello to him.
Did you guys give anything in return?
All right. That, of course, was the president there from the White House, flanked by Elon Musk. He mentioned Mr. Fogel. That was the American prisoner that was in Russia that has been released. So he was saying that he's going to be at the White House tonight. So just a little bit of an update. There are a bunch of headlines coming out of that, including talking about seeking Congress, a congressional vote on DOGE cuts, the Department of Government Efficiency cuts if needed, which I think is maybe of import certainly to our audience. Let's see what Bloomberg News reporter John Harney has to say about it. He's been watching this and also tracking these headlines from President Trump, as I said, there with Elon Musk and his son X in the White House, surrounded by reporters and taking a variety of questions. John, we're getting used to these playbacks and certainly conversations and updates from the president and potentially a member from his team. And today it was Elon Musk. What stood out for you in terms of newsworthy and pertinent to the Bloomberg audience?
Well, he did or was about to sign the executive order that would further establish the Department of Government Efficiency, or DOGE, Musk entity, to further scrutinize the government spending, different departments, including particularly the Treasury, and they also spoke about the Defense Department. Musk also said that the payments process at the Treasury Department was flawed, though he didn't provide evidence of it. And Trump also complained about judges who have put restrictions on some of the things that he and Musk have done regarding the government bureaucracy.
John, how does the transparency claims that Elon Musk made stack up? He says we're all doing it in public. We're putting it on the Doge website. We're putting it out on X. How does that gel with what you and the other reporters at Bloomberg News have found about what he's actually doing at Doge?
Well, all of this is happening very quickly and in many different places at once. So it's hard to quantify. I mean, one thing, Trump has met with reporters a great deal more than his predecessor Joe Biden did. There's been several encounters, multiple encounters since he took office. But it takes some time to figure out just what Musk is doing, wants to do, what his ultimate goals are, and of course, some of these this executive order, which calls for cutbacks, cutbacks throughout the bureaucracy. That just can't just happen, because there's going to be yet more court action, lawsuits, etc.
John, we only have a little bit of time, so I want to make sure to get to a lot of questions with you. The actual amount of money we're talking about, Musk is talking about tens of millions of dollars, sometimes talking about billions of dollars. We're talking about a $6 trillion federal budget here. Do billions of dollars actually make a dent in the fiscal situation in the U.S.?
Well, it's a billion here and a billion there, and eventually adds up, of course. But this buyout plan that they were trying to put across, and that some federal workers have accepted, that wouldn't by itself save any money, right? At least right away, because these workers would still have to be paid apparently into this September. So as far as in the trillions, no, we're not seeing that yet.
Yeah, I wonder if we do, and how we get there, if Musk will succeed in that goal.
John, we were anticipating, I think, an executive order. Did we get an executive order? Did we kind of miss it in the playback? I'm just curious what you are hearing.
We don't know. I personally don't know if he's actually signed it yet. It was one of the things that was apparently on his desk. He almost certainly will be signing this this order that would allow job cuts across the bureaucracy.
All right. We're going to leave it on that note. Listen, John, thank you so much. Appreciate you jumping on and just going through some of those headlines for us. John Harney, he's Bloomberg News reporter, joining us from our D.C. bureau. I got to say, I'm heading out. We're in New York City proper, getting ready to head out a little bit to northern New Jersey, so head a little bit north. I'm a little nervous because the weather, we're anticipating some snow here kind of late in the evening and then into Wednesday morning. Let's see what Craig Allen has to say about it and what we should expect. He's Bloomberg weather reporter, and he joins us in New York City. So, Craig, do I need to be worried? I should be out and about and back home, hopefully in my warm home by 10 o'clock tonight. Do I have to be concerned?
By 10 o'clock tonight, yes, you would have to be concerned. I have a feeling it will start developing around the New York City area anytime after dark, after a lot of people get home. So this is my advice for now, is to make sure that you get yourself out of work now. It's coming up on the 5 o'clock hour, and go straight home. I mean, there's no need to really go pick up any commodities or anything like that at this point for the household. It's not going to be a major snowfall for the New York City area. Go home, relax, and then tomorrow morning, make sure that you give yourself a little extra time to get rid of some of the snow. This is a system that is going to be bringing more snow from the city on down towards Philadelphia, on down to Baltimore, and then Washington. I think Washington may turn out to be the jackpot for a lot of this. On the other hand, if anybody has to travel to the north of New York City, they're going up the Thruway or up 91 in Connecticut, and then cutting over towards Boston. You may not get very much at all from this particular system. That's the way that this one is going to work. This is a strange one. This one is more to the south and less to the north.
All right, Craig, I don't want to make you uncomfortable, but the reason I was heading to New Jersey was to go to a wake. So, are you telling me I shouldn't do that? You really, 9:30?
The roads, I saw many of the trucks out there already today. They were putting down a lot of brine, getting prepared for storm number 2 here, which is what this will be. And I would say that conditions will start to get a little slippery the later we get into the evening, 8, 9, 10 o'clock or so. For example, it's not snowing in Philadelphia just yet, but there's snow showing up on radar. It is snowing in Baltimore and Washington at this point as well. So anybody that has to take the trip on down, obviously, conditions are going to deteriorate with your travels to the south. But around Philadelphia, the reason I brought that up is the air is cold and dry. I'm sure you felt that right through the afternoon too.
Yeah.
So the snow is actually evaporating as it's coming on down from the clouds above. As the air moistens up, more and more snow starts to fall, then we're going to start to see the snow reaching the ground. It will start to stick right away because the ground has been at or below freezing much of the day. So anything that hasn't been treated, sanded, salted, unfortunately, it is going to start to get slippery. Now, the track of this storm also is good in the sense that, for the New York City area, I should say, in the sense that we will be, I would say, on the 1 to 3, 2 to 4 inch side. Again, lower amounts north, higher amounts south. But if you're traveling down towards Philly or Atlantic City or Baltimore or Washington, D.C., we could see jackpot numbers there of 4 to 8 inches of snow, and that's really going to hamper travel conditions both on the ground and in the air for tomorrow morning's commute.
Hey, Craig, how is this winter stacking up when it comes to other winters? Are we getting particularly more snow? Is it colder? Remind me, because I just kind of have no idea what's going on, if this is normal.
Okay, well, I can speak for most of this northeast corridor here. Obviously, we've had a crazy winter in that they have more snow totaled up this winter so far in some areas down along the I-10 corridor in the southern part of the United States. You remember that about a week or two ago. They had 9, 10, 15 inches of snow there. And so far, the New York City area only has 10 inches of snow approximately for the entire winter. We are below average. We are a little bit above where we were last year at this time. Last year, the snowfall was just absolutely paltry for winter. So we're a little bit above that so far this year. but we are not anywhere near. We're still about 5 to 10 inches below average in terms of snowfall. Cold, it's been a really cold January and December too, the latter part of December into January. Once we settled into this pattern and the polar vortex decided to, it's like come on down into the United States, it has been pretty much persistent, and it will be with us, I think, at least for the rest of this month. Temperatures also this month will be somewhat below average. Again, that's New York City, but it's also encompassing on down to Washington and the Boston area too. One thing I should mention about Boston, you've really had a lot of trouble getting snowfall for the Boston area. There really hasn't been very much. You are way below normal in snowfall, but this week, I can tell you this much, it's going to make up for it all around. We've got not just number 2 tonight around here, but number 3, 4, and possibly 5 as we head on into next week. So I've got a lot to do.
All right, keeping you busy, and now you got me freaked out, so I'm not sure what I'm going to do.
Paul Brennan has got a lot of snow to shovel tomorrow. I can already tell.
Good exercise. It's good for the heart, buddy. Listen. Yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say, be careful, but yes, it can be very good exercise, right?
That last storm, it wasn't a ton of snow, but it was heavy. It was wet and heavy. Craig Allen, stay safe. Good to check in with you. All right, everybody, that's going to do it for the Tuesday edition of Bloomberg Business Week. Some earnings, some news from the White House, some weather. Keeping us busy.
Yeah.
I still don't know what I'm going to do.
Just, be careful.
I know what everybody should do. Balance of power. It starts right now.
Politics to the world of business. This is Balance of Power. Live from Washington, D.C.
From Bloomberg's Washington, D.C. studios to our TV and radio audiences worldwide, welcome to Balance of Power. Alongside Joe Matthew, I'm Kaylee Lyons.
President Trump signing an executive action to direct federal agencies to work with Elon Musk's Doge to reduce their workforces, saying he will seek congressional approval on cuts if needed.
This after Trump's meeting with the King of Jordan at the White House, with Abdullah agreeing to accept 2,006 children from Gaza, but staying mum on Trump's redevelopment plans. We'll get reaction from former U.S. ambassador to Iraq and Turkey, James Jeffrey.
And Fed Chair Jay Powell telling the Senate Banking Committee in day one of testimony he's in no rush to lower rates, fielding questions about Trump administration policy and the dismantling of the CFPB. Democratic Senator Elizabeth Warren, the committee's ranking member, will join us with more.
Thanks for being with us on this Tuesday evening, and we begin with what took place in the last hour. Elon Musk joining President Trump during his executive order signing in the Oval, ordering the federal agencies to work with Doge to trim their workforces. Musk spoke about the efficiency group's findings so far and defended his approach, but the president did note Congress may have a role to play.
We're finding tremendous fraud and tremendous abuse. If I need a vote of Congress to find fraud and abuse, it's fine with me. I think we'll get the vote, although there'll be some people that wouldn't vote. And how could a judge want to hold us back from finding all of this fraud and finding all of this incompetence? Why would that happen? Why would even Congress want to do that? Now, Congress, if we do need a vote, I think we'd get a very easy vote.
Joining us now for more is Bloomberg's Megan Scully. So, Megan, we once again come back to the questions of the roles of the different branches of government here. Have we seen any desire so far on the part of this Congress to keep the Department of Government Efficiency in check?
Certainly not from congressional Republicans who are in charge of both chambers. We've seen more or less a capitulation of their power of the purse. Today, House Speaker Mike Johnson even told reporters that he believes that the executive, the Trump, has some authority to move appropriations around and certainly to make some of these cuts unilaterally was the sense that he was sending. He actually said that the judiciary should kind of hold off, step back in issuing all of these orders that we've seen over the last few weeks, the judiciary being the only branch of government that is really trying to put the brakes on Musk and Trump's agenda here.
It's interesting. We had the buyout offer go out to federal employees. I don't know how many have accepted it at this point or did before another judge got involved in that case. But apparently it's a better deal to be fired. You'll have up to a year of severance in this case through workforce reduction than taking the buyout offer. So are we done with the initial offer here?
We'll see. There was always concerns. The government employee unions raised concerns about the buyout offer, whether it was legal, whether they would eventually get it. The reduction in force is different for each agency, for each employee, depending on how long they have been there. Certainly a lot of questions as individual members of the federal workforce weigh their decisions here and their future prospects, whether they're going to retire or not. This is, something that we're feeling here in the district, but only, less than half, I think it's about 20% of the federal workforce is actually in this area here in Washington. So the effects of this are reverberating across the country.
Federal workers leaving because of a snowstorm today around 2 p.m. I wonder how that jives with the whole stay in the office motif at the Doge. Bloomberg's Megan Scully, thank you so much. While meeting King Abdullah today, President Trump was asked about how the U.S. plans to acquire Gaza.
We're not going to buy anything. We're going to have it, and we're going to keep it, and we're going to make sure that there's going to be peace, and there's not going to be any problem, and nobody's going to question it, and we're going to run it very properly, and eventually we'll have economic development at a very large scale, maybe the largest scale on that site.
Following their meeting there in the Oval Office, which was initially set to be closed to press, King Abdullah tweeting, "I reiterated Jordan's steadfast position against the displacement of Palestinians in Gaza and the West Bank. This is the unified Arab position." Joining us now with more, Bloomberg's national security reporter Nick Wadhams. King Abdullah did agree to take in a couple of thousand sick Palestinian children. Right. Will that be the extent of his cooperation here?
Well, President Trump certainly wants to find out. I mean, you did see the president back off a little bit. He said he didn't feel the need anymore to threaten Jordan and Egypt, which he had done in the last couple of days, threatening to pull all aid unless they participate in his plan. I mean, this is really going to put Jordan in between a rock and a hard place, because there is no way they're going to countenance a plan where the U.S. has boots on the ground in Gaza or takes it, as the president said, or forces Palestinians to leave. But it's also not clear that there is a plan within the U.S. to do that beyond what the president is saying. There's no indication yet that this is filtering down and they're actually coming up with some sort of serious plan to do this. So right now it looks like Jordan has managed to find an off-ramp, and I suspect that what you'll see is the president continue to put pressure on the idea of, okay, maybe behind the scenes we don't ask Jordan to take all the Palestinians who remain in Gaza, but we are going to ask you to do more beyond those 2,000 children that they agreed to take.
And I do wonder what the role of the likes of Steve Witkoff, for example, the Middle East envoy, will be in these ongoing conversations. But he was otherwise occupied today, Nick, taking a private plane to Russia to pick up an American who's been in prison there since 2021, Mark Fogel. We learned from Donald Trump in the Oval Office about an hour ago that he could be at the White House at 10 p.m. this evening. Do we have a sense of what the administration had to give in order to get him home?
That is a great question. President Trump was asked that in the Oval Office spray with Elon Musk, and his response was not much, which could mean anything. I mean, but it is interesting, at least, that he said not much rather than nothing. I mean, what's clear is that Russia would not have done this without getting something in exchange. So it's going to be a big question. I mean, Trump had repeatedly criticized former President Joe Biden for doing exchanges, basically swaps, saying it only encouraged more hostage taking or Americans being put in prison. So it'll be a big test for his negotiating skills. I mean, and the other thing is Steve Witkoff's supposed to be the Middle East envoy. As you say, what's he doing in Russia? What we're seeing here is another indication of just Trump likes Witkoff. They're longtime friends. They've played golf together. He trusts him. He's going to have him do it. So it's possible that there was some exchange related to Syria or the Middle East, but so many details we don't know still.
All right, Bloomberg's Nick Wadhams, thank you so much. And just one final quick note on the Middle East. We just got a statement in from the Egyptian Foreign Ministry saying that Egypt will be preparing a comprehensive vision for Gaza rebuilding and that the Gaza plan will ensure that Palestinians are not displaced. The story will continue to follow. Just as we followed today, testimony in the Senate from the Fed chair, Jay Powell, who said the central bank does not need to rush to adjust interest rates, again signaling officials will be patient before lowering borrowing costs further.
With our policy stance now significantly less restrictive than it had been, and the economy remaining strong, we do not need to be in a hurry to adjust our policy stance. We know that reducing policy restraint too fast or too much could hinder progress on inflation.
Joining us now for more is Bloomberg's Michael McKee. So, Mike, consistency from Powell on that messaging, also consistency on him not wanting to get ahead of the policies of this administration.
And can you blame him after the news conference thingy we just saw? Jay Powell wanted to keep it low-key today, did not really want to send a message to the markets, let alone to Donald Trump. He basically repeated what he has been saying for some weeks and what pretty much everyone else on the Fed has been saying for some time now, that the economy is in good shape, growth is strong, the labor market is healthy, and while inflation is down, it's still a little bit above target. So let's just leave things as they are, and we can do that because of the strength of the economy.
So markets not pricing in, at least fully, a rate cut until September. Michael McKee, should Jay Powell just go on vacation till then?
Yeah. If he goes somewhere warm, I'll be happy to go with him. At this point, yes. We don't know what the president is going to do. It appears many people in the administration don't know what the president is going to do. So Jay Powell certainly can't know, and he doesn't have any way, nor do any of the economists at the Federal Reserve, a way of assessing what it will mean for the economy. So he wants to stay on the sidelines, and he really can't trade when they might raise rates or by how much, because at this point, it's all up in the air. But Powell did say they would look at the data on whatever policies the president does have on the economy, rather than speculate and start moving policy around based on what they think might happen.
Well, Mike, looking at the data, I was surprised to hear the chairman talk today about the idea that inflation expectations are anchored in light of the University of Michigan sentiment data we got on Friday that showed a big spike in inflation expectations, due in part to the threat of tariffs from this administration. Just how tenuous is that anchoring he's talking about?
Well, it may be more tenuous than the impression he's trying to let on. Now, the Fed always says that they look at long-term expectations as a more reliable indicator of whether things have become unanchored. And the 5 to 10-year forecast in that Michigan survey did show no change. But we did see, we have seen in the markets lately, the longer-term break-evens start to rise significantly. So market people are starting to think that maybe inflation is going to be a bigger danger down the road. He didn't address that today.